guys are breaking my heart. Final Fantasy XIV Evercold theories. You have them. Today we react to them. And they both excite me and also terrify me. We are going to get nerdy. We are going to don the theorist spectacles and dive off into the deep end. Hello, everybody. It's your boy Jmulls. And at this point, this one's a tradition. Like I said, it's a tradition. We have to talk about my boy. First up, we have at Evan W8539 who says, "Alright Jmulls, here's my theory. I do agree that Xenos could be the savior of the Fourth from the Tales. God, what rabbit hole have I descended us all upon? Oh my god. Not only does he have mastery over all elements of magic from his resonant / Shinryu form, but he has mastery over the powers of stasis / protection, not Trojan, via the consumption of the Mother Crystal. He has demonstrated the ability to construct floating land masses in the sky during his trial in Stormblood. You could also argue the Medion fight an Endwalker when we stood on his back in his Shinryu form. Yeah, just saying. It is hard to tell in the trailer what may be ice and what may be crystal. So my addition to this theory is that I think the giant floating crystal that the mystery woman is preying on top of is actually a crystallized form of Shinryu that serves essentially as the planet's new mother crystal. It even looks like you could envision it as giant flapping wings and tail of a dragon frozen in place. The seeds in each titan are thematically more aligned to Howlroot, but they could also be similar to the elemental crystals from the Seal of Hydaelyn that the Warrior of Light sees frequently during his A Realm Reborn Heavensward journey. Low-key, I kind of forgot about those. Finally, I think the giant crystal at the beginning of the trailer, the spiral one in the ocean, is a red herring and is actually Origin, the enormous structure in Aetheris that is part of Air Solanti, let's go with that, in the far North Seas. Well, we have a lot to dissect. I've heard it both ways. I am in two minds about this theory overall. One is aligned with my brain and the other one with my heart. My heart says we're on the money with this, and that it very well may be Xenos. We may be dealing with our friend yet again, and they're going to be very upfront and in our face with this thematic parallel they were constructing back in 7.5 Part 1 when Howlroot showed us like a vision of Xenos' scythe, and constructing that thematic parallel that the way the Warrior of Light is acting and is going to act to this coming tragedy of the solstice is kind of in line with the worldview of Xenos. And there's a lot of these little moments where, as of right now, it could go either way, but if it ends up being the case that it was all Xenos and that he has a larger impact on this narrative than we believe right now, a lot of stuff does fall into place as this theory laid out. However, the one thing I can't really get past when it comes to all of this is that it feels kind of fanficky. Not that that's necessarily a problem, because Xenos is awesome and any way I can have my boy back in the story again, I will take, but I'm not sure if they would want to delegate a role that would be that extreme and that consequential on this new narrative arc and the Godless Realm saga. I don't know if they would want to have an old character like Xenos take up that mantle instead of having some other new character take up that role and build up that character. Could I see it happen? Yeah, I kind of can. And since they basically beat us over the head with the theme going forward for the Warrior of Light is going to be this thematic parallel between how we tackle the problems that we're going to face with the solstice and all that being quite similar to the worldview and the way that Xenos was acting, with that being kind of a guiding theme going forward for the Warrior of Light, I could see them just say, screw it, let's bring Xenos back in an active capacity and really play with this notion and idea in your face. All the while you bring back essentially a fan favorite character, and the fan being me, right? Like, let's not mess that up, right? Like, I would be over the moon. But again, like this theory pointed out, a lot of those elements that we saw in the Evercold trailer could be explained by Xenos' presence. The Wanderer the old lady is talking about throughout the trailer, I don't buy being the Warrior of Light. Unless there's some grand reveal that this like scene of the old cat lady telling the story of the Fourth happens way in the future, I just don't see this being the Warrior of Light because the timeline doesn't match up. They're acting acting as if this takes place in the distant past or something. Or maybe not even distant past, but the past nonetheless. And yeah, sure, time can flow differently on a shard compared to the source, but even then the timeline doesn't match up for this wanderer that she's talking about to be the warrior of light. I feel like her describing the wanderer here and having the warrior of light on this scene, that's a red herring. That's a moment in this trailer that is meant to be deceptive. And like we talked about in an earlier theory, you have Xenos' body at the end of the universe. Obviously, nothing's confirmed. You could write a story where Halmarut went there, yoinked Xenos' body, and sent him to the Fourth. And then he did a bunch of stuff there, became known as the Wanderer or Far Wanderer, whatever. And then when we get there, we're going to deal with that. Do I think that's necessarily likely? Not really, but I do think it's a possibility. And when it comes to the point that was made in the theory about sometimes there's parts of the trailer where it's hard to determine if something is ice or crystal, I started Final Fantasy XIII on stream recently, and even early on into that game, that is an aesthetic that Final Fantasy XIII kind of runs with, particularly in one of the earlier zones. And it's got me wondering just how much possible connection there might be to Evercold with Final Fantasy XIII. I'm still relatively early on in that game, but the more I play it, the more I'm like, wait a minute, they could easily do something like this in Evercold. It'll be interesting to see. Well, I had dessert, now it's time to take our medicine. We have at CH0BIQ who says, Winterers are just ghosts and we are getting Shadowlands. I crawled out of that fetid hole years ago. Do not drag me back. No! Okay, trying to hurt me with World of Warcraft Shadowlands aside, I do think there could potentially be something to the Winterers being ghosts. Or maybe not necessarily ghosts, but ghost adjacent. Calyx isn't really alive, if you want to call him that. He's an endless. And if we really want to get philosophical, you could honestly describe his memories existing on as an endless form as essentially a ghost of him that we are basically dealing with. And we know we're going to be dealing with another Winterer in Evercold because, well, Calyx basically just told us. But there wasn't really a ghost in that Evercold trailer. Plus, it's relatively early on, so couldn't you argue this theory is just connecting dots that aren't really there? Well, about that, when it comes to the Evercold trailer, a lot of us, myself included, kind of looked at this one-eyed Odin-looking guy and said, oh, he's probably, you know, the Winterer for the Fourth. That makes a lot of sense. He looks like a character that could easily be the villain because he looks like he's gonna make me depressed when I learn about his backstory. Final Fantasy XIV kind of specializes in villains that make you feel like that. However, if we're really going to play on this train of thought that the Winterers are all going to be essentially ghosts or ghost adjacent things, well, let's just take a look at this scene and we see the Aerith Aura lady just disappear. So yeah, I feel a lot of us are expecting some kind of massive plot twist in the future, potentially in Evercold as well. The one-eyed guy not being the Winterer and having that ghost be the Winterer and she's essentially like haunting this dude for whatever reason. I could see that. I could easily see that being the case. Now, granted, we are still very early on. We don't have too much information about Evercold, but I do think there's quite a bit of thematic, what do we even want to call it? Interest, intrigue, with having the group that is trying to preserve life after the solstice, known as the Winterers, be composed of a bunch of people that are essentially ghosts of life itself, trying to find a way for life to persist past the solstice. And actually, when I look at it through that lens, Halmarud being an Ascian and being in charge of the Winterers also makes a lot of sense, especially with the way that Ascians can do like possession or just the way we look at Ascians. You could kind of view them to be ghosts of the ancient, well, ancients. Again, I'm not saying that they're all just necessarily like Casper the Friendly ghosts or Ghostbuster ghosts, but some kind of spirit, some kind of memories or things that are close enough to being ghosts to kind of fit the bill. Now, there is another way they could play on this, and that is instead of having the Winterer have to be a ghost or something ghost adjacent, have them be related to ghosts. And in this case, yeah, the one-eyed Odin guy could easily be the Winterer because, well, he kind of just gives off that aura. Even from the little snippet in this trailer, he is dealing with essentially what is probably a memory of this aura looking like Aerith girl. So maybe he's potentially haunted by the ghost of her past and the memories that he has of this character that we don't know of. Like maybe we could be haunted by the ghost of Xenos. It all comes back around. And then on top of that, for Evercold, which is the first expansion that is coming out after they name dropped the Godless Realm saga, And now we know we're dealing with the Winterers if the Winterers are composed by a bunch of characters that are essentially ghosts or ghost adjacent. Kind of interesting they have us be Reaper here, isn't it? Almost as if we'll be reaping those ghosts and bringing them to some kind of afterlife, maybe. I'm just saying, there are layers upon layers here. It's like an onion, or even an ogre. Now, people, settle down and get around because we have a long one today. Not like that, you filthy animals. So let's get comfy and let's break this theory down. We have at Mr. Leo6986 who says, when traveling to a reflection of the source that has been unbalanced by an element of one type, having a form of safeguard to protect oneself is a necessity. That said, going into the fourth won't be so easy. For some reason, the ominous thick cloud of the fourth feels to me like a barrier of the cold ether to which we will need to find a means of getting past upon entering the fourth. The Scions won't be joining us right away within the fourth, as they cannot even see our portal used by the key, at least not within 7.5. However, we do see them coming out of a golden portal within the trailer upon some sky islands that look like the sky islands of the source. This means they either need another means of travel, which needs to be discovered, or they are fighting on the source, while we venture to the fourth, much like Shadowbringers. Okay, we'll break this one down piecemeal, and we'll tackle this section first, because they do kind of spoil like what our solution to this problem's going to be within this Evercold teaser trailer, because you can just see the golden path that we use right here, and you see Alphino and Estanian come directly from it. Like, they're not really subtle about it. Like, you can even see the outline on the portal itself. Now, I do agree that doesn't necessarily mean that this is the fourth. We talked about this in a previous theory video. I also think on stream as well, this could easily be like the Sea of Clouds, like in Ishgard and like that general region of the world. We could be on the source here. It doesn't have to be the fourth. But what I think this indicates is that we will become capable of bringing other people, namely the Scions, with us through what we're going to just call for now the Dawn Trail, because come on, that's kind of a layup. I wouldn't be surprised if we sort this out in 7.5 Part 2. As a reminder, we are not done with the 7.5 story. We've only had Part 1. Part 2 will be in September. And I imagine we'll either have this solved there or at some point during the Evercold narrative. It really wouldn't surprise me if we just like find some kind of secret when it concerns either the Asm Stone, Ethos, or just some other condition to us using this like doodad that we just were not familiar with during the confines of the story of 7.5 Part 1. Like maybe we just need to be holding hands with the people we want to travel with, and then they'll be able to see the door. But if we don't actively choose someone to come with us, then they are incapable of even seeing the gate. Like maybe it's something along those lines that would kind of explain why we are the only ones that were able to go to the 13th in 7.5 Part 1. Now, the funny thing with this teaser trailer though, there's not a scene in it that we have a confirmed Scion spotting in the fourth. Because like we talked about, this scene right here could easily just be the Sea of Clouds on the source. This doesn't have to be the fourth. And there's no other scene in this teaser trailer where we directly see a Scion on the fourth, with the one possible exception of this character maybe being an aged up Y'shtola. I don't really buy that. I think it's either a Shad or just an unrelated character. It can't be Matoya because this is a catgirl. We see a tail like early on in this video, like right here. You can just see it right there. Also, you can kind of make out the cat ears like underneath the hood. But besides that, at no point anywhere that I can even remotely recall do we ever see the Scions on the fourth. Now, that could just be them withholding information that will be revealed at a future FanFest. That's entirely possible. But like as of right now, we have no direct confirmation we're going to be seeing the Scions when we're in the fourth at all throughout this expansion. I mean, we probably will, but it's not a guarantee. Quickly, we will realize we need some form of lightning ether to help safeguard us, and given how the ninth is filled with it, Sphene will most likely find some plot device for us to use for protection, pause, and to break through the barrier of cold fog, as seen in the trailer, the Warrior of Light atop a metal platform with lightning going around, breaking through the clouds. Yeah, we talked about this bit in the first stream I did after Evercold's announcement, when we went through the lore and tried to theorycraft and all that. I'm not convinced this is the fourth. Now, to me, this is like one of two different locations. This is either the cloud layer that we know is going to be there there on the 4th, separating the surface from the sky above. But with the amount of lightning that is in this part of the trailer and in these clouds, which could be there on the 4th, I think it's particularly likely that we are heading to the 4th through the 9th. Now, I'm a little bit less confident in this because since that theory, we've had patch 7.5 pod 1 with the inclusion of what we're calling the Dawn Trail for now. So you got to imagine if we want to get to the 4th, we could just open up the Dawn Trail and just walk to the thing, right? But as I'm pretty sure this theory we'll get into later on, the 9th has a surplus of lightning ether, which is opposed to ice. Considering we just dealt with the 9th, that can't be by coincidence. It really wouldn't surprise me if one of the solutions we come up with in terms of how to deal with all the ice and snow and frost of the 4th is by just pumping a bunch of the lightning ether from the 9th into the 4th, or using some kind of tool or technology that we can utilize from the 9th and maybe use the lightning of the 9th as a shield in order to pierce through that barrier. They love playing with like the elemental disc-ficking thing. They love using this thing. This chart we originally saw back in Shadowbringers, they're in love with this thing, and you can see lightning is opposed to ice. And we've been doing something kind of similar with the 13th and the 1st, with light and dark. Sure, it's a little bit different, but you gotta imagine, similar principle, they're probably gonna use relationships like this a lot in the Godless Realm saga. Upon entering the 4th alone, there are two paths that are likely to occur. Path 1, we are met with the sheer devastation of the icy cold lands of the 4th upon its surface, not the sky right away. This is supposing that when we teleport to the 4th, we end up on the surface, not really seeing anyone for a small amount of time till we come across two travelers in robes, the Aura female and male from the trailer. These two. From them, we learn about how most citizens dwell in the sky after a catastrophe calamity had befallen the 4th, ice. They will explain how those who remain below can handle the cold weather for some reason. The Aura female will tell us of the sacrifices every so often that have to be done to appease the arcane giants of the Colossi, aspected to each element, that we have covered extensively, to keep them supplied with enough ether to continue the power, the magic that is used to keep the sky lands afloat. She will also explain how the arcane giants are pillars of their world, akin to the weapons of Final Fantasy VII, also akin to Yu Yvonne, requiring some source of ether to stay powered. The Aura pair will point you to the sky civilizations. Now, I'm gonna lop for a little bit here, because as I mentioned earlier in this video, I have begun a playthrough of Final Fantasy XIII for the first time ever. I'm actually kind of enjoying the game, but now it's not identical, but like the state of the world and the story of Final Fantasy XIII reminds me a lot of the premise of Evercold, and it really wouldn't surprise me now if like Evercold is some kind of merge between Final Fantasy VII stuff and also 13. If we hear the terms Fal'C or LC throughout Evercold, I would not be surprised. And I'll be really interested to revisit the Evercold trailer after I beat Final Fantasy XIII and just see what can possibly be recontextualized. Because, spoiler, there's an event in Final Fantasy XIII that is called Ragnarok. Again, with the Norse theme, it's like, people have pointed it out for a while, but I really wouldn't be surprised by this. I think there was also some interview, again, this might be complete lop, but I'm pretty sure there was an interview where someone at Square Enix said that a lot of the new blood that are coming onto the teams, their favorite Final Fantasy, the one they grew up with, was 13. So if we start to see a bunch of 13 references in 14 because of like that kind of new blood coming into the teams, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think it's like a guarantee or anything like that. I just wouldn't be surprised if it happens. Path 2, dos. Wait a minute. Engage the comfort. I feel like I need a phone home. Path 2 is landing upon one of the Sky Islands and coming across Helmarut or Calyx, giving us some dialogue and mentioning the arcane giants being their targets. They will also mention the Winterers have gathered to witness their Winter of the 4th deeds that will doom the 4th. We won't see him, however, like John Cena. After leaving them, we will come across a familiar face, yet it isn't the same person, but rather a reflection of. This person will lore drop on us and send us off on our merry way to stop the Winterers' plan after learning their importance. We will arrive at the first one to whom the first Winterer will show their face, another familiar face. Do something to the ice giant, causing it to be violent and vanish. We defeat the ice giant, and as it vanishes, the effects can be felt across the 4th, 4th and has effects not only on the 4th, but other reflections as well. They will react. We will venture back to the source shortly after and hear about the Scions fighting off a new enemy, those shard-like creatures. After solving that problem, we will gather the Scions and inform them of what we learned upon the 4th. Meanwhile, the Aura pair make their part or way to do the sacrifice sooner due to the collapse of an ice giant, doing so in hope that it will fix whatever is happening. I talked about this on stream. These little crystal guys are kind of weird because they are living beings. Like when you look at them closely, these are tentacles. These things like wiggle around. Look at them. They're not just like stone constructs. Those are tentacles that move, but also have like a flow of ether that we can see on the inside of their tentacles. They're very weird, aren't they? Also, I would kind of argue they feel out of place in the context of everything else that this trailer is covering. They're just kind of there. And to me, they almost feel like Final Fantasy XIV's version of drone warfare. And we know the plans of the Winters are to enact a rejoining. They want to rejoin the shards, which will kill a lot of people, but it'll prevent the solstice from wiping out life in general. It's a trolley problem. But as we covered in the Highland Zodiac arc, if you want to cause a rejoining, you need not only have a calamity occur on the shard, but something has to happen on the source. For Shadowbringers, the calamity that we stopped, you had the flood of light on the first, but remember the Garleans were going to just like gas the entire world essentially, and it was that like gas that was going to bring stasis to everything that was going to be the calamity on the source. What would the calamity be for a 4th rejoining on the source? Like maybe it's supposed to be these guys, and maybe it's like an Armageddon by drone warfare, kind of like that one Armored Core Games ending. Could be a really interesting like race against time. Okay, as a brief aside, I got a new microphone. I've been messing with the settings, and oh my god, that's been taking forever. But anyways, back to story time. Citizens of the Sky Island will tell the tale of the Promised Land and how it used to be long ago before the icy weather had intensified. One by one, the ice giants will fall, causing unseen effects across all the reflections. The Aura pair could be on a pilgrimage of sacrifice, leading to the Aura sacrificing herself for the greater good to protect everyone. The male Aura, devastated, now wishes for the world to fall because a world without her isn't worth living in, mimicking Cloud's descent from a hero into madness after Aerith's passing. He would join the Winterer's cause and another Winterer from the same source who would be guiding him to do so, akin to a Sephiroth of the expansion. Ultimately, we will have befriended the male Aura and convinced him to join us in the long run, but as a bigger part of the story closer to the end, meaning he'll get a lot of screen time and the girl will be there with them, also so we grow attached to her and her character as a whole before she's ripped from us. Her being a pillar in a more mortal form, being a bigger catalyst to a bigger plot, so her death will have an effect on the world. She could also be akin to Reen and Gaia. My only thing with this part of the theory is that it really does kind of feel like the Winterers are joining up with Halmarut, because in their own way they want to safeguard life for after the solstice. With the theory being presented in this part, it feels more like his interest would clash and he would actually root for the solstice and just the complete annihilation of life, unless there's some kind of nuance to it all. Calyx did say that he finds like the means of the other Winterers questionable or even objectionable. So like maybe going off the idea that, hey, this one-eyed guy from the trailer, maybe his goal, his methodology for life to persist after the solstice isn't to save as many people as he possibly can, like with Calyx turning people into endless, but being willing to sacrifice people to fuel the endless existence. Maybe his idea is, hey, she dies or she is dying. I want to have a plan in place so that I can sacrifice everyone else to preserve her life, to bring her back. That way life would persist after the solstice. Calyx would still find him objectionable because maybe he wouldn't agree with the scale of the sacrifice that Odin over here, we'll call him Odin for now until we get an actual name, is willing to go to in order to save her. Again, we are working off of like 7 seconds in a teaser trailer here, right? Chances are this isn't going to be the full picture, but I could see them playing kind of on the theme of Final Fantasy VII. I'm becoming increasingly convinced of two things when it comes to Evercold. One, I think there's going to be a heavy Final Fantasy VII presence, but I also think there's going to be a heavy Final Fantasy XIII presence. I'm only a few hours into Final Fantasy XIII, and that one's becoming very apparent, but I am still kind of on, yeah, this character might be related to like Halmarut for the context of Final Fantasy XIV lore, but I do think this character is supposed to be like an Final Fantasy XIV insert of Aerith. And I think instead of Final Fantasy XIV just going the route of, well, let's do the Sephiroth story again, despite the fact we're also making Final Fantasy VII Remake, let's play on that idea. Like how the players are kind of conditioned in Remake to want to save Aerith. What if we play on the idea that this guy wanted to save Aerith, or his version of Aerith, but was unable to do so, and now we see his descent into madness, or maybe not even madness, just whatever he is willing to do in order to possibly save his Aerith, or damn the world for taking her from him. There's a lot they can do playing on this idea of these familiar character archetypes from Final Fantasy VII. Reed and Gaia being oracles of light and dark. Within Eden, we found out ice is very close to light, and thus Reen was able to transform into Shiva and further that of light with the dragon. Gaia being dark aspected. What's the element closest to dark? That's right, lightning. Take that one, atheists. Gaia will be coming somehow, with her relevance becoming more and more in media such as Disadiah. She's hinted at being more of a major character. Her ties to being an Ascian might also be helpful. Gaia also received a voice in the MSQ. They don't give characters a voice for no reason. I entirely agree with the premise that Reen and Gaia are definitely going to be major characters going forward. Maybe not necessarily in Evercold, they could be. Like, maybe we have to wait for the patches or something like that, but for the Godless Realm saga, I have long been of the opinion that we are essentially building, like, not necessarily an Avengers, but we're building a team, and that team is going to be composed of people representing their own various shard. So, for the 9th, we have not only all of Alexandria, but mainly we have Sphene. You could also argue Shale, but, like, mainly Sphene. For the 13th, we have Zero, Golbez, and Ukulele, and also the bartender and the Crystarium. But for the 1st, that one's obvious, Reen and Gaia. Now, who we get for the 4th, because this theory of mine, and just like a lot of other people, let's be fair here, is only bolstered by the idea that we're going to the 4th immediately. It's not like we're going to another piece of the source and expanding the world over there. We're just going to another shard. They showed shard imagery significantly in the first bit of that teaser trailer for Evercold. They are not subtle about this. And it's not like they haven't taken characters from like previous raid series and then made them important characters in the MSQ. I mean, Graha Tia is exactly that. Now, whether or not they'll do that again remains to be seen, but they have already brought Gaia into the MSQ. They've already pulled that trigger. It's been a long-running kind of wink-wink, nudge-nudge. When are they going to pull the trigger and make Eden mandatory? They could also just kind of not and expect you to have, like, done Eden already, and if you hadn't, okay, well, maybe you'll be a little bit confused by Gaia, but you can probably work it out yourself. It just feels inevitable to me. Now here's the juice, not orange. Xenos may have been mentioned through 7.5 in multiple ways, my goat. From Shinryu to his scythe, he's coming back in some form. It could be because of his experience in bringing a world to the brink or his ultimate goal of getting stronger to face us, or even a redemption arc. It would piss Twitter off, but I would be very happy. He's still very much a mystery here. A reflection of him, if not him, is starting to seem likely. I've been talking about for a while, I think like the most likely thing they do with the character is not necessarily bring him back, but have the Warrior of Light experience like traumatic visions, like not really hypnosis, but almost like PTSD visions periodically of Xenos just showing up to fulfill a role kind of like Oddbert did in Shadowbringers, where like whenever we were alone or just sometimes when we were alone, he would show up and we would shoot the breeze. I could see like something happening like that with our mind or imagination or whatever, just conjuring up some version of Xenos for us to talk to. Not actually being Xenos, maybe that could be a reveal, like one way or the other, but having some kind of hallucination. I think that could work very well, especially for this parallel they are really trying to drive home between the way that we are interacting with the world, mirroring that of like Xenos back in Endwalk and Shadowbringers. I told you to get comfy because this one's a long one. Hori Boulder also is a prime candidate for coming in to the forefront of things, much like Gaia. He's been given a voice in the MSQ. This should speak volumes as to two characters who have been part of the overall lore for a long time, while finally getting voices may lead them to becoming more important to the overall lore. Gaia's affinity for lightning and dark, and Hori Boulder's tanking experience and membership as a Scion's B team gives them lots of potential here. I think also elevating some members of the B team of the Scions, like Hori Boulder for instance, and making them more prominent is an interesting way of giving us like a pseudo new character, because we haven't really interacted with Hori Boulder that much. Like he's always been there, but he's never been like a major character. Well, if you give him a character arc and you make him a far more important and active character in the story, you're able to make the Scions still feel relevant, but at the same time feel as if you're injecting new blood into the series while still kind of relying on stuff you have done before to make it feel like one overarching narrative. I think it could be a very genius play if they nail this. Seeing a person's reflection, I skipped a line there. Another thing to note is we know 2 job classes are coming, 3 if you count Beastmaster, no one does. This info will determine more about what is likely. Seeing a person's reflection within the 4th feels like a good plot thread to dig into here, just like the 1st had its own Warrior of Light and 4th will too, among others, but I think a finer twist would be seeing a reflection of a bigger character, a reflection of Xenos, as that world's Warrior of Light could be a great twist, meaning he could come back in that form. Just a theory, as any number of a character's reflections can be on the 4th, but imagine. Would be pretty dang cool, I'll admit. As for the Winterers, the group from the sound of things is the new Ascians in a sense. We'll meet some, fight some, befriend some, and potentially either join them or change their plan enough to make them scatter, leaving 1 or 2 to do something else in the further future. Sounds a lot like Organization 13 from Kingdom Hearts a bit. Couldn't tell you, I've only played the first game, and also a little bit of the card game, funnily enough. They have an ultimate goal, but to do so, have to do an evil deed for the greater good till a protagonist comes along and changes everything. I've kind of said this before, but I'm going to reiterate it here. I really don't think, and I do think they're smarter than just doing this, by the way, but when you have a theme that is as nuanced as this glorified trolley problem we're dealing with when it comes to the solstice, our solution can't just be, hey, there actually was a way to save everybody and everything in all of our homes. We can get out of this like scot-free. We don't have to worry about anything. You guys are actually just overreacting. You didn't think of this one thing. Don't worry though, I got you covered. Because I feel like that would cheapen the emotional or just thematic impact the Winterers could bring to the story. Again, I think they are smarter than this, and I don't think they're going to fall into this pit trap or pitfall, whatever. Another thing to mention is the timeline of things. In the trailer, the old woman is telling the story as if it was a bunch of events that happened long since past. Are we having some time travel shenanigans again? Maybe Y'shtola attempts to travel to the 4th, and in doing so is sent to the past and must have a life there for years till the Wanderer Us arrives, but I still feel like it's not her. Yeah, we know it's a cat girl. I don't think it's Y'shtola. I could see it being like a Y'shtola shard, or maybe in 7.5 part 2 before we actually go to the 4th, she's whisked away, kind of like in the lead up to like Shadowbringers, and a lot of time passes in the 4th before we're actually able to get there, and then when we get there, she's very old. I really don't think they're going to do that to a character like Y'shtola, that they kind of view as a pseudo mascot for the game overall. I just don't see that happening from a business side of things, but we'll see. And as for the tree Yggdrasil, once we discover more about it from the 4th, I believe that will lead us into the expansion after Evercold going into Meracidia and the South Sea Isles. Why, you may ask? Because that place is lore already in game, and also about Yggdrasil. Thus, both are connected in some sense, so Yggdrasil is going to be a major plot device at some point too. I entirely agree. What I don't agree with, though, is the timing, because I don't think it's going to be 9.0. I don't think we go to Meracidia until 10.0. I think that's going to be the end of like this new narrative saga, and 9.0 we either go to another shard, or there's some place else on like the source we have to go to, and then also interact with another shard. Then I also want to read this little bit at the end here. P.S. What also can cause a global ice age? A meteor! And if it's Final Fantasy VII related, I mean, we've talked about that one a bit before, but man, that one feels kind of inevitable. Maybe with alien life within it. Genova, that helped make the ice giants as something that we fight during the expansion. Maybe the winter of the 4th being related to it, or what we think is Yggdrasil is actually the media itself just frozen over. Yeah, I mean, time will tell on that one, man. It does kind of feel like at some point they just have to do media because it's freaking media, right? Especially if the expansion is going to be somewhat themed around Final Fantasy VII. Like, you have to pull that trigger. It's pure fan service coolness. And come on, a giant meteor raining from the sky, you can use that in so many different ways for the story. It doesn't have to be a straight cut from like the story of Final Fantasy VII. You can take it in your own unique direction, which Final Fantasy XIV's writing crew are pretty dang good at doing, by the way. So we'll see. But here's where you come in. Leave a comment down below with your own theory for the future of Final Fantasy XIV's narrative, and especially what's gonna happen not only in 7.5 Part 2 in September, but also in Evercold. I would love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives, and I may react to them in a future video. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And as you are well aware, we like to do a bit of theorizing around these parts, and I had to go deep into one of them in particular. formula. We're talking Aristotle. We're talking trigonometry, people. And you can bet I can turn it all around back to Xenoblade. Want to find out more? Check out the Aristotle theory right here for more. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe. Have a great day. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.